Good morning, Sarah. Welcome to Candle Culture Talks. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, so I am Sarah Hayford. I'm the founder and CEO of the Land Collective, and we are essentially a social mobility organisation, and we work with young people from ages 16 to 25, usually from low-income backgrounds and underrepresented backgrounds, and we essentially help them to start a career in the real estate and built environment industry by equipping them with the right skills, knowledge, and networks needed to really start and thrive within the sector.
What an amazing business you have. Can you please tell us a little bit about your cultural background, where you come from, what shaped you?
Yes, so for me, I have West African heritage. So both my parents are from Ghana, and I was born and raised here. And there's so many different cultural things that kind of go into being kind of just West African and Ghanaian. But I think one of the things that has really kind of shaped me growing up is this, I guess, sense of humility and community support. So I really have a struggle when it comes to promoting myself or kind of selling myself and my business, because growing up we were always kind of told to be more humble, grateful for things, and then you kind of keep your achievements to yourself. So that's something that, even though it had its place, I'm kind of working as an adult to try and change that and use that to my advantage in my business. I think another thing that kind of grew up and shaped me was our, I guess, community-centered culture in Ghana. Like everything is tackled as a group. Like there isn't really like an individualistic mindset towards things, and no matter kind of what you need help with or if you need support with something, there's always going to be someone around who kind of jumps in to try and help you or share an opinion or something about that. And I think that community-centered nature of my upbringing and my heritage has also played into my business with the Land Collective, because we're a very community-focused organization. We're already thinking about the bigger picture. How can we support and uplift others and not just focus on individual wins for different people, but how can we bring people along the journey? How can we support each other, have peer-to-peer networks? Because I think that's what really moves the dial forward. It's very hard to do things alone. So bringing as much people together and cultivating a community mindset is really important to me.
Very interesting. And with your business and in your role, would you say you deal with different cultures, bringing those students and young people from different cultures?
Yes, definitely. So we have around 2,000 young people as part of our kind of community base, and we work with them and employers to kind of bring them opportunities, whether that be networking events, community-centered events, or jobs that employers are hiring for, like apprenticeships and things. And most of our students are ethnically diverse, so they have heritage from different places, or perhaps they have moved here from another country. And taking the time to understand where they're coming from, different kind of expectations their families might have, for example, really feeds into the work that we do. And it also feeds into the advisory that we give our employer partners. Because, for example, as you probably already know, real estate is quite a closed off sector, and it's always been quite traditional, quite old school. So it's not really a sector that a lot of people are aware of, especially when you compare it to law and medicine and finance, and engineering and things like that. So we've kind of had to take that approach and go to our employer partners and say, look, if you're trying to, let's say, target more ethnically diverse candidates, their parents won't understand this sector. So we need to also be reaching their parents as well as these young people as well, because their parents are telling them to go into banking or to go into law or medicine because they don't understand how intricate our sector is. And they want the best for their kids, but they just don't have all the information and things like that. So being able to culturally understand those differences is really, really important and plays into kind of how I run my business, the kind of events we run, but also how we engage with different partners like parents and family members and things like that as well.
Did you notice any like cultural differences and how people blend together? I assume you have some community gathering or, group gathering. What's your observation?
I think because London is, and we're mostly London centric, but I think because London is such a melting pot of different cultures, there isn't really that one thing that connects people all together because there's so many different elements that people can find, whether it's supporting the same football team or maybe you have the same heritage as somebody else. Maybe you're both Christian, for example, and you connect on that front, or you're both Muslim and things like that. So there are so many different ways that we are connected, and not just kind of through ethnic diversity and culture, but in other ways as well. And I think when we do our in-person events, it's always really, really nice to see the things that get pulled up. So maybe it's being from the same area and connecting on that front. Religion is a very, very big one that people seem to be connecting over recently. Or it could be things like hobbies as well. Being from the same kind of country, having the same heritage is always quite nice. Sometimes we hear Arabic being spoken at our events between a few different people, or Yoruba if you're from Nigeria and things like that. So it's a really nice way just to get people together who often wouldn't have met if it weren't for our events. So that's quite nice to have.
If we talk a little bit about building relationship, obviously you work with businesses. What have you noticed, like how it is to build a relationship here in London in multicultural environment? What is important?
For me, it's always about being able to connect at a more personal and deeper level with people. So whenever I go into like a client meeting or something, or I don't know the person I'm going to be speaking to, I try and do a little bit of research beforehand, not to kind of stalk them or anything, but kind of just to see, okay, do I recognize that surname from somewhere? Maybe they might have similar heritage to me. Maybe I can bring that up at a meeting or something like that. Or I've seen that they like to run. I mean, I hate running, but I can mention it as a way to kind of build connection with them and things like that. So I think just trying to connect with them on a more personal level always kind of works in my favor, because sometimes when you kind of just go in, you only talk business, it doesn't really feel authentic. And I always kind of want to get to the bottom of, okay, who is this person? What do they like to do? What are their hobbies? Where do they come from? Is their faith a big part of their lives? Because that can also impact how they act in the workplace and how they manage relationships as well. So pulling on those different elements always kind of works to kind of build a more holistic relationship, I believe.
So Sarah, you run your business and you connect with so many people and young people. What is a good leader look like for you?
I think I've been really fortunate enough to work with, I guess, both good leaders and bad ones, and being able to kind of sit down and take away lessons from each person I've worked underneath and take it into my own business, I think is a real privilege. So I have quite a small team at the Land Collective, but I think for me, what a good leader looks like is somebody that is fairly inspirational in some way. Like, not that you want to be like them, but you should be setting a good example for how you run things and how you lead, your empathy and compassion that you have for people, but also your performance. So setting a good standard for that. But another big element is, like I said, compassion, empathy. I always knew I didn't want to run a toxic workplace where we run ourselves into the ground and there's no sense of forgiveness or flexibility for any other things apart from work. That's not the kind of business that I wanted to run. So I was very, very strict with myself on that. But also being able to understand people's differences and understand where their potential lies, because for everybody that's going to be different. And I think you want to curate a workplace whereby people feel that they can perform their best and they feel trusted to take on tasks and responsibilities. Because I've seen a lot of workplaces where that's not the case, and your best talent often leaves when that's not available. So those are some of the qualities of, I think, a good leader would have.
And you mentioned you had some good leaders and bad leaders maybe through your career journey. And what is a good leader? Did you have someone that inspired you to be exactly what you are saying, a good leader?
Yes, so I've had quite a few mentors as well as working underneath and with different people. And for me, what sets them apart is the level of understanding they have with you and the amount of space they give you to just do your best work and taking the time to understand your working patterns, what kind of triggers you or sets you off, what kind of environments don't you work best in, and understanding that sometimes the way that you work will need to flex and change in order for you to do your best work. So I think I take that into my own business when I hire somebody new or with our existing team. So one of the things I tend to ask when I'm hiring somebody new is, what is your ideal way of working? What do you like and what don't you like? And I think that that question always takes people off guard because they're never really asked that usually. It's sort of like you go somewhere new and you just have to adapt. But we can adapt on this side as well and kind of bend a little bit to kind of the way they want to work. And I know that I really struggled with my leadership in the beginning because I kind of went from being a graduate in the industry, leaving that job and then starting my own thing and focusing on that. So I didn't really have a lot of data points to
And
pull from,
experiences, yeah,
at the
okay.
time. So I kind of just felt like, okay, I'm going to hire people now because that's what businesses do. And then I hired people and it was a disaster. Like, so constantly learning and evolving from those experiences has really brought me to where I am today. I think there's still room for improvement and developing my own leadership style and what that looks like. But I think as long as you're honest about that journey and the fact that you're still learning and that you won't always get it right and you're open with your team, I think that can go a really, really long way.
So what it is like to work in your business?
That's a good question. I'd like to say it's pretty not hands free, but I think the French term is laissez-faire. So I have a leadership style that after kind of doing an assessment, you take over a few tasks, you do a few responsibilities. I really kind of want you to come into your own a little bit and essentially create your role in your own way. So, we've had social media managers, let's say, in our team, we've had program managers, and each person handles that role differently. They still meet their tasks and meet their requirements, but they've all approached it so differently. And it's really, really interesting to see how they've done that. And I think that comes from having the space and room to really be creative and lean into more innovative ways of doing things. And because we work with both businesses and we work with young people, they're very, very different audiences and they have different ways of doing things. So that requires kind of like, on the foot thinking.
Adaptability.
Exactly. And it's really, really important that they have that they can be comfortable with going into a school environment and having sometimes really challenging questions from 16, 17-year-olds, but then being able to go into a meeting with senior executives and talk about early careers functions and strategy and those gaps. And again, I think being able to perform well within our business essentially just means you're very, very adaptable, but also you're not afraid to lean into your creativity, which is really, really important for me.
Fantastic. And Sarah, you are young yourself, young leader, and you work with a lot of young people. But from your experience, what advice would you give someone starting their career journey?
See, I get this question all the time, and my advice is always very, very different each time. But I'd say, especially now, we have a really challenging market in terms of recruitment and jobs, work, and things like that. So my advice to young people would be to try as many things as you can. Don't be afraid to go out there, get different bits of experience, but also have an understanding that there will be a common thread with the things that you enjoy and you like. So for me personally, I've always been a bit of a side hustle queen person. So throughout university, I was working part-time. I did interior decorating, freelance work and things like that. So there were lots of different things that I kind of put my hand into to try to get experience, to network, but also to build up my own personal skills, and being able to see what the common theme was throughout that was really, really important for me. And for me, it was helping others, being of service to others. And that is a theme that I still carry in the Land Collective now. So even as a young person, trying out all these different things, seeing what you like, seeing what you don't like, there will always be a key theme at the bottom of that. And then you can bring that into whatever environment you have in the future. So that would be my one bit of advice. Maybe a little bit abstract, but
No,
that's my
it's
one bit
very
of advice.
interesting. But as a young person starting your own business, how did you find that courage, to break away and do that?
One of the things, I had a really supportive dad who essentially told me I could be president of the US if I wanted, even though I can't legally. He was that kind of dad, so he
Amazing.
supported me a lot through everything. He still does, my biggest cheerleader. And I guess I got that audaciousness from him in order to start new things. So whenever I want to do something, I just go and do the thing. If it works, great. If it doesn't, I'm just okay, I'll just go do something else. And that's something that he's kind of set up within me, because I saw him start a lot of things. Not all of them worked out, but just to see him get up and go again. And he was also our primary caregiver growing up. So he would do the school pickups, he would make us dinner, and then he would work from, let's say, 11 p.m. till morning, come back from work, drop us to school, do all of that stuff. My mum was also working, but 9 to 5, so they would kind of switch during the day. But he was more so the face that we saw. So to see him do that, but also start and launch a business that essentially didn't work out, but he would go and do something else, and he would go to different countries and just try and find new ways of doing things. It's hard to not see that and not want to do it yourself, just to kind of have a bit of an inspiration there. And I think that's always nice. And one of the things I saw him do as well was go to China when I was really, really young, because he wanted to see the manufacturing scene there. And then I ended up going to China for my year abroad when I was at uni, and I loved it. It was incredible. So those sort of things, you kind of follow in your parents' footsteps a little bit. And I know the importance of having that supportive parenting structure. So I always kind of say to our community members, think of me as sort of like a supportive parent or like a big sister figure that you can always kind of lean in and ask for help, and don't be afraid to ask silly questions and things that you don't know, because it's really important to have that foundation, and a lot of kids don't have that, unfortunately. So
Yeah, it looks like you had a good role model
yes.
for you to follow and have that support, which is
Yes.
amazing. And one more question about different leaders, and you come across, you work with different businesses, and what advice would you give to a leader working with the young people, but not only young, but what advice would you give to lead well?
I think for me, a big one is that potential shows up differently in different people, and it doesn't always look one way. And we see this a lot, especially with our community that's mostly ethnically diverse, mostly female, and mostly from low income backgrounds. A lot of them don't have parents who work in corporate roles or companies and things like that. So the way that they show up will be slightly different to somebody who, say, both their parents are directors in a finance company and they've done work experience, they've done internships, they go to, they go on skiing locations and things like that on holiday. The kids we work with are quite different in that regard. That's not to say that they are not capable, but sometimes they show up differently to the workplace. So having a culture that allows for that difference is really, really important. And one of the examples I share from my community is that we once held a joint event with one of our corporate partners, and there was one student in particular that he's very, very engaged. He comes to everything. Any kind of event we put on, he's always there. But because he was quite introverted and quite quiet, the event organizer kind of saw that as, oh, he's not really interested. He doesn't really want to be here and that sort of thing. But he writes everything down. He will notice the shoes you're wearing and he will mention something about your shoes and you'll be like, oh, I really like your shoes. Where did you get that from? And he will pick up really, really small things that you won't even notice, even in your cadence or something that you said on the day. He's extremely, extremely like down to the detail with things. And that's a quality that a lot of companies want in people, that attention to detail, being able to go up to somebody and connect with them on a different level and things like that. But from the surface level, they saw it as him not being engaged. But it wasn't after, he came up to them afterwards and kind of had all these talking points and things that he recognized. He had all these questions that he'd written down and things like that. So it doesn't always mean that, different talent is the loudest in the room, so they get the opportunity. Often in corporate, that's kind of how it is. But allowing for people to be different and to show up differently really, really matters, because if not, they're not leaning into their authentic selves. And a lot of companies say they want authentic, professional, forward-thinking employees, but then they get into the company and they don't have space for that. So I think as a leader, that is the kind of culture you need to try and cultivate. Otherwise, you're just creating carbon copies of people. And I mean, some companies want that, but I'd say most companies don't want that.
Fantastic. Really interesting stories. Sarah, thank you so much for coming and sharing all the insights about different cultures and your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you.